Welcome to our Weed Biology module.
This module was authored by Christine Moncada, Jeff Gonsolis, Constance Carlson, and Craig Schaefer of the University of Minnesota in 2017 and updated in 2026. Narrated by Constance Carlson, with additional narration generated using the AI voice of Hannah from ElevenLabs.
In this module, we will cover several aspects of weed biology. You may wonder why this is important to understand, but their biology can guide us in choosing the best tools to manage them.
First, we will discuss weeds' effects on crops, then weed life cycles, weed reproduction, and weed emergence.
Most organic farmers say that weeds are one of their significant challenges. Because weeds compete with crops for nutrients, light, and moisture, they have negative effects on crop yield.
In this photo, grassy weeds have overgrown the planted corn crop.
Weed effects can go beyond yield reduction to interfering with harvest, such as bindweed vines that can get wrapped up in equipment, or by reducing quality, such as nightshade berries that stain soybeans.
On this slide, we show bindweed plants with their vines and inconspicuous flowers, and nightshade berries, which are round and black.
Even small populations of weeds can affect yield. Therefore, in most cases, weed control is necessary. This table shows the percentage of yield loss that might be expected due to one weed per square foot of different weed species.
In corn, one wild buckwheat plant per square foot can lead to a 10% yield loss. In corn, one wild mustard plant per square foot can lead to an 18% yield loss. Also in corn, one common ragweed plant per square foot can lead to a 21% yield loss. In soybean, one green foxtail plant per square foot can lead to an 8% yield loss. In soybean, one lamb's quarters plant per square foot can lead to 25% yield loss. Also in soybean, one eastern black nightshade plant per square foot can lead to a 40% yield loss.
As you can see, when there is one especially competitive weed plant per square foot in a corn or soybean field, there can be significant yield loss. In this section, we will cover the different life cycles of weeds. Weeds, just like every plant, can be categorized by their life cycle. An annual grows from seed, grows vegetatively, sets seed, and dies in 1 year. A biennial is similar, but the process occurs over 2 years. A perennial can live for many years. In temperate climates such as ours, a perennial will go dormant in the winter and come back to grow again the next spring. An annual completes its life cycle, germination, vegetative growth, flowering, seed set, and death, in 1 year. Annual weeds are very successful in most cropping systems. Because most crops are also annuals, annual weeds easily adapt to these cropping systems. Annual weeds produce large amounts of seed to grow the following year. Examples that most field crop farmers would be familiar with are velvet leaf, pigweeds, water hemp, lamb's quarters, and foxtails.
In this photo, we show the yellow, 5-petaled flowers and large seed capsules of velvet leaf.
Another type of life cycle that falls under the annual category is winter annual. Generally, annuals complete their life cycles in 1 season. In other words, they germinate in the spring and set seed and die by the fall. A winter annual is similar, but it germinates in the fall and sets seed and dies in the spring. Winter annuals can be common in no-till and in winter annual crops such as winter wheat and winter barley. Examples are horsetails and wild mustard.
Here we show the small white flowers and fluffy white seed heads of horsetail, also called horseweed.
Biennial weeds take 2 years to complete their life cycle. The first year's growth is vegetative, with the plant producing a rosette. In the second year, the plant produces flowers and sets seed. It dies by the end of the second year. Examples are musk thistle and mullein. Biennial weeds tend not to be very significant in field crop systems, but are more common in pastures.
This photo shows a musk thistle rosette in a lawn, with large spiny leaves radiating outward from the center of the rosette.
A perennial lives longer than 2 years. A perennial is different from annuals and biennials in that it can replicate itself not just through seeds, but also vegetatively through specialized structures. Canada thistle, quackgrass, and dandelion are examples that can be particularly troublesome in perennial crops such as alfalfa.
This image shows a quackgrass plant with its long horizontally growing rhizomes.
In our next section, we will discuss the ways weeds can produce offspring. There can be more than one way depending on the species. One of the reasons that weeds are successfully competitive is that most of them produce a lot of seed, as shown on this table.
Redroot pigweed can produce 117,400 seeds per plant. Lambsquarters can produce 72,500 seeds per plant. Giant ragweed can produce 10,300 seeds per plant. Velvet leaf can produce 7,800 seeds per plant. Yellow foxtail can produce 6,500 seeds per plant. This data is from Renner in 2000.
Most of the seeds that weeds produce are retained in the soil, where they can build up to an incredible level. The weed seed bank is comprised of the viable weed seeds in the soil.
Here is a table with the number of viable weed seeds in soils of 4 agricultural fields in Minnesota. In Sacred Heart in Renville County, there were 5,100,000 weed seeds per acre. In Danube in Renville County, there were 8 million weed seeds per acre. In Morris in Stevens County, there were 25,500,000 weed seeds per acre. In Waseca County, there were 333,700,000 weed seeds per acre. This data was adapted from Robinson, 1949.
As shown in this table, there are millions of weed seeds per acre in the seed bank. Compare that to 34,000 seeds per acre, which is a typical corn planting rate in the upper Midwest. Seeds in the weed seed bank can remain viable there for years, depending on the species, until the conditions are right for germination.
Here is a table of the number of years of seed viability for different weed species. Quackgrass seeds are viable for 1 to 6 years. Wild oat seeds are viable for 4 to 7 years. Cocklebur seeds are viable for 16 years. Foxtail seeds are viable for 20 years. Canada thistle seeds are viable for 21 years. Lambsquarters seeds are viable for 40 years. Redroot pigweed seeds are viable for 40 years. Velvet leaf seeds are viable for 40 years. The data from this table is from Ross and Lemby, 1999.
As this table shows, some weeds can stay in the soil for up to 40 years if the conditions are right. One obvious weed management strategy is to not allow weeds to go to seed in the first place. We will discuss more strategies in our weed management modules.
This picture shows numerous brownish seed heads from foxtail plants that have yellowish-brown leaves.
As mentioned previously, perennials have other reproductive structures in addition to seeds. A significant structure for organic farming is the rhizome, which is a way that plants can reproduce vegetatively. Rhizomes are underground stems that are capable of generating roots and shoots. This means that a small piece of rhizome can generate an entirely new plant.
Here we show Canada thistle plants with their thick horizontal rhizomes that can grow several feet below the soil surface.
One way to prevent the introduction of rhizomatous perennials is to be careful not to spread rhizomes from one field to another with your equipment. The last section in our module relates to when weeds emerge, which can vary considerably. The time that weed seed germinates in your field is an important factor for management. In a general sense, weed emergence depends on soil conditions such as soil temperature and soil moisture. Other management factors such as tillage can stimulate weed emergence. So emergence can vary from field by field because conditions can vary. Additionally, weed emergence varies significantly by weed species.
In this image, we show a row of corn several inches in height growing in a field. The row is surrounded by many different weed species of various sizes.
However, there are general trends and times of weed emergence. By learning these, you can gather information to guide your weed management strategy. In this chart, we show some common times of emergence for weeds in Minnesota.
In early to mid-April, wild mustard and kochia emerge. In mid to late April, lamb's quarters and giant ragweed emerge. In early to mid-May, common ragweed, woolly cupgrass, and velvet leaf emerge. In mid to late May, foxtails, red root pigweed, and cocklebur emerge. In early to mid-June, black nightshade and water hemp emerge. In mid to late June, crabgrass and jimsonweed emerge.
For example, wild mustard generally emerges in April, velvet leaf in May, and water hemp in June. Targeting mechanical weed control operations to when problem weeds emerge is critical in their management. Not only do weeds start emerging at different times, the length of time they emerge varies by species. For instance, giant ragweed tends to complete its emergence over a shorter period than giant foxtail.
The duration of emergence is 3 weeks long for giant ragweed and woolly cupgrass, 7 weeks for lamb's quarters, common ragweed and yellow foxtail, and 10 weeks for velvet leaf, giant foxtail, and water hemp.
In the case of weeds that have a long emergence time, mechanical weed control operations will likely need to be repeated. We have covered some of the basics of weed biology. Please view our modules on cultural and mechanical weed control to see how to apply these principles in practice.
This project is supported by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, Organic Transitions Program under Award Number 2013-5, 1106-2-1005. This project is supported by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Agricultural Marketing Service, National Organic Program under the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, TOPP, in the Midwest region. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this publication are those of the authors and should not be construed to represent any official USDA or U.S. government determination or policy. The University of Minnesota shall provide equal access to and opportunity in its programs, facilities, and employment without regard to race, color, creed, religion, national origin, gender, age, marital status, familial status, disability, public assistance status, membership or activity in a local commission created for the purpose of dealing with discrimination, veteran status, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. For more information about this project, please see organicag.umn.edu, copyright 2026, Regents of the University of Minnesota. All rights reserved.